And of course, our units were still over there, and they had to be very careful because we might have very well had more people killed. So you couldn't just, just because these guys died, make them Citizen of the Year. So the way we got around it was we named the units Citizen of the Year, which everybody knew that it was Matt and Josh we were talking about. But they came to me and said, "Will you present the award or present this?" And I had to think about it because obviously I do a lot of talking like this, and it's generally not a problem. But that was something I seriously dreaded because I wasn't certain I was going to be able to get through it without breaking down, because it really has been traumatic on the community and really the testament that these guys' lives. We had disputed internet and email right after Matt died. Like some guys that were not even, he had gone over to another unit to help them because he's really a great leader. And these guys, these guys who are serving in Iraq had written these emails back to the family that just really illustrated what a great American he was and his leadership ability. Because one guy wrote to me, I think, just in an email conversation, he said, "There are people over here I wouldn't follow through a Walmart, but I would follow Matt Stovall anywhere." And the title of my column that week was "Follow the Laughter," because they said in that hellhole of Iraq, wherever their little group was, that if there were people laughing and talking, you can bet that Matt Stovall was in the middle of it, because that was the kind of person he was. So to be able to present an award to those folks, and as it turns out, right dead center in the middle was like, I had eye contact with one of the mothers, and I made the contact. I made the comment, which is true, that the presses don't roll without me thinking about the price of the freedom that allows them to roll. And I suppose that we're unique in that people are shot, they're killed, they're put away because of what they say in the newspaper. But we have a unique freedom that is being protected by these guys. So I guess that would be one of the good parts of what I get to do is that kind of thing. The bad part, we had to publish an article the other week about a prominent guy who committed suicide. And it was difficult to do. We didn't really want to do the story, but we had to because there was a question initially of whether it was a homicide or suicide. And the Secret Investigations got involved, and we, it was a story. It had to be a story. But our reporter, our managing editor, did a terrific job because it was mostly a tribute to the guy. Woven in there was the fact that he killed himself. It started out saying what a great guy he was. Which let me interject here that one of the hardest things you'll ever do as a journalist, no matter what, print or broadcast, is to write or report the story about the death of the uncles. It's probably the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do is write the obituary for a child, somebody you know, or even I've had to write it for friends. So a little thing that we've always tried to do, in part because of some personal experiences I've had, we try to paint a little portrait of the person, not just John Doe died in Iraq, blah, 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 or in this case, the man committed suicide. You ask the question, well, tell me a little bit about John, or tell me a little bit about Tim, and you begin to paint this picture of the person. Now, you have to be careful, because one time we started out doing a story like that, and it was a rosy picture of this guy that had died in a car wreck, young guy. Turns out he had just gotten out of prison and had a record about 10 miles long. And so we had to kill that story pretty quickly. It was sad. A lot of good things were said. We talked to his mother and his people, and of course she didn't bother to tell us he just got out of prison. And I wouldn't expect her to. But, we had to exercise the restraint of not publishing that. So you have to be careful, but never stick a recorder or a microphone in somebody's face and say, "How do you feel?" Because that's not appropriate. And the best thing to do is say, "Well, tell me about so-and-so. Can I get a little bit of your time?" Or what we often do is we'll go through an aunt or the funeral home or somebody and say, "We're interested in painting a little portrait about Ed. And could you give us some family members who might be willing to talk?" And 9 times out of 10, people will talk. about the person. You know, when you say, tell me a little bit about them, what they like to do. And that way, you end up with a nice little portrait. I would commend to you, it's a book, Portraits of Grief, that the New York Times, they did them after 9/11 on everybody that died in 9/11, especially in New York. I think they did it for the other places too, but they started out doing it for the folks in the Twin Towers. But they're just little snippets. And there's a book out now. They did this in the paper. It was a full page every day that would run with just a little snippet about the person who died and some little interesting fact. And for journalists, it's a great way to see how just in a paragraph or two you can encapsulate somebody's life and their contribution. And I would commend that book to you to look at, especially if you're in a situation doing police reporting and you're covering. And some of you may not even end up doing that kind of writing, but if you're going to do that kind of coverage or you end up in a small town having to do that kind of stuff, then it's something you probably want to look at, because I wish I brought some examples. I have done that before, but it's a very good book because it just gives you these little snippets into these people's lives. Y'all bound to have some questions.